Why is corruption so endemic in the Indian system? Why is corruption so entrenched that despite a 7-year effort, Prime Minister Modi is finding it difficult to eliminate corruption? Let's try and understand. Hello everyone, welcome to RightVIEWS. Today we'll be discussing the nature of corruption in India and the reason why it is so endemic and entrenched. To understand that, we'll have to understand it through a lens of socio-political schematic. Let's get into it. Now, to understand the socio-political system, we go with this very generalized and broad schematic of the socio-economic system. Now, here we have the government system, which comprises rulers, government, law, the officers of the government and government employees. And this whole government system creates an environment which acts on the general people. General people are trying to improve their quality of life. Now they do this by doing a lot of economic activity, work as we call it. They generate income or profits from it, and this income and profits they spend either to improve their work or to improve their quality of life. This is the overall schematic of a general socio-economic system. Now, if we impose the understanding of a liberal dharmic king as envisaged under the Artha Shastra or any other such older concepts of monarchy that existed in India, it would look something like this. Now here the red arrows are in fact the taxes which are collected by the government. The green arrows are the investments made by the government, and as you will see that the ruler exercises some sort of a benign influence on the government, and the government has its own independent will and decision making capability, and it can go against the will of the king. Now in this case the king tries to undertake or takes decision in favor of the citizens and therefore sort of ensures that the whole system works for the common public. Now here the government exercises robust control over law. It exercises the law, and the legal system exercises a robust control over the officers and the government employees. But the government system as a whole exerts only a benign influence on the general public. You will also note that these arrows, that the taxes and the investments are all dotted because they are not very high intensity. So this is quite a hands-off approach to governance. So the king or the government does not seek too much tax, and it does not do a lot of investment. It does a little bit and it expects a little bit of return. So it's a limited intervention state. If you replace these benign rulers, the good rulers, with extractive rulers, you get a system something like this. Now the taxes are deep red because the tax system is extractive in nature. It is trying to extract the maximum income, benefit, wealth from the general public. The government and the king do not care, the government system as a whole does not care about the well-being of the general public, but it's an extractive system. Now if you see this in the system, the rulers, they exercise a robust but also an extractive control on the government, and the government exercises a similar extractive control over the laws. The laws that are created are designed to extract all the advantage that the citizen gains through his effort and initiatives. Now if you see, the rulers, the government and the laws are sort of the ruling elite. The officers, however, and the government employees are in fact coming from the general public, but they have to exercise a robust and extractive control, the red arrow, over the general public. It restricts the general public too much. They are not able to create enough wealth, enough opportunity, enough initiatives. They are stifled. Now at the same time you will see that the investments by the government is no longer on the quality of life side, but it is only on the work side, only to an extent which will help improve the earnings of the government. Now here you will see that the government is, whatever the government earns is pulled up into the kitty of the ruler. So this is considered as the personal property of the ruler. This kind of system is an extractive system, and it impinges a lot on the general public. Now we see here that the people respond by appealing to the government employees and the officers who are part of the society, who are not amongst the ruling elite. So they give them incentives to help reduce this burden of extraction. And these yellow lines are the means and mechanisms and pathways with which the government employees and the officers are incentivized to reduce the extraction burden. This is the pathway of corruption. But it is morally justifiable for the officers and the government employees because of the extractive nature of the government and the rulers. The Mughals, the British government were extractive rulers who plundered the Indian state and plundered the wealth of the citizens and the general public. And that is why there was a sort of a resistance to these governments, and in effect we earned our independence and we installed a democratic government in this. Now this is the kind of government that we installed. Now we replace the rulers with politicians. Now these politicians have a benign control over the government, which is basically through the parliament. Now the government has, however, the same robust and extractive control over the law. The law has an extractive grip over the officers, and they have an extractive control over the government employees, and the employees control in a stifling manner, they control the general public. That part was not changed when we got our independence. What we hoped was that the taxes which were red will now turn blue, which will be easier. What we hope was that the investments which are in the green arrows will be more both on the work and quality of life side. What we also hoped that the corruption pathways which were created in an extractive regime, the yellow arrows, would fade out. That was what we expected. But instead what we got was a corrupt government. Now what corrupt government does is imposes an extractive taxes system on the general public, and that's why these arrows now are still red. You find that this corrupt government, corrupt setup, does not allow investments both in work or in quality of life to be robust. So what happens is they have a limited investments in the work side because that's what pays the taxes eventually, but the investments in quality of lifestyle is very poor. And that's why India did not have electricity in all its villages till very recently. India did not have drinking water and doesn't have drinking water in all the villages even now. And this is because of the lack of investments that you see here in terms of a very fine dotted green arrow on the quality of life side. You notice the red arrows in the entire governmental chain. These red arrows actually signify robust and extractive control of the government system on the general public. Now because of this, the people were harried and they had to exploit the old pathways of corruption to ease this burden. And that is why corruption was continued to remain. However, there is one change between this system and an extractive government that we discussed earlier. Here, the government employees, the officers, the law, the government, the rulers, all are part of the same group. They are the people who are having power. This is what they used to create hurdles. Now, earlier we had an extractive regime, and to beat that we had to get the corruption. Now these people created hurdles, and to overcome these hurdles you have to use those pathways of corruption. And this is why these pathways of corruption exist. They continue to be used, and they are in fact getting more and more nurtured in the regimes till date. Now there is one more element in this. Now the resources that are extracted by government employees and officers through corruption, they are also fed to the politicians, and you can see those yellow arrows now moving, circumventing the government and going to the rulers, that are the political class. Now that is where the politicians make money, the government officers make money, the government employees make money, and everyone imposes that cost on the general public, who is not able to improve his quality of life, or he is not able to get enough opportunities in terms of jobs and businesses to improve the quality of life. Now what happened when Modi came? Now when Modi came, Modi did a lot of reform, but look at the extent of his reform. He eliminated the corruption which was existing between the officers and the rulers. Now the rulers again became corruption free. They are quite benign. They are focused on improving the investments and in both work and quality of life. So these green arrows, the investment arrows, now became solid green arrows. That signifies that there is a lot of investment being done in the work and quality of life indicators. However, the corruption pathways still remain, if you note, and that is the shortcoming of this government. So in effect, if Modi government wants to improve the real ease of doing business and it wants to reduce the corruption, this is the map that they have to follow. The arrows here are what is the problem with the current system. There is a little bit of corruption and money flowing between the officers and the politicians even now. That has to be eliminated. But that is the low-hanging fruit. What is most important is the governance structure, which flows from the law to the officers to the employees and then on to the general public. So the governance structure has to be robust but not extractive. Those arrows need to turn black, and those people need to be more sensitive to the difficulty faced by the general public. These changes have to be made in the governance structure. The second part is that the governance structure should not impose in a robust, extractive manner on the general public. In fact, the governance structure should be a benign influence on the general public. Third part is basically you have to reduce the extractive nature of taxes, which you can see in those red lines. Those are still extractive. Once you eliminate the extractive taxes, the fifth part, which is the pathways of the corruption, will automatically reduce and they will automatically fade away. So this is the roadmap to prioritize certain reforms so that it unshackles the economy and it creates an environment that is conducive to private initiative, private effort, which the people themselves will create jobs. They will themselves create value. They will themselves create wealth, and they will pay enough taxes to bring the government finances in a much more comfortable position. But for that, you have to take this leap of faith. This robust but extractive control mechanisms have to go. Extractive taxes have to go. And people have to be sensitive to the needs of the general public. Once this happens, you will find that we are soon progressing to a developed country status. If you like this video, do share and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and do join us for our long form interactions on our podcast. And thank you for listening, and have a nice day.